What if I told you that for years, some of the most powerful investors in America, former secretaries of state, military generals, billionaires, and major media outlets, all believed in a technology that didn't work, trusted a CEO who carefully crafted every word she spoke, and poured billions of dollars into a company that was built on an illusion so convincing that even seasoned professionals couldn't, or wouldn't, see through it. And by the time the truth finally surfaced, fortunes had vanished. Patients had been put at risk, and one woman had gone from Silicon Valley icon to federal inmate. This is the full story of the woman who stole billions while pretending to revolutionize healthcare, and how she managed to fool an entire system that was supposed to know better. Elizabeth Holmes was not born into poverty or desperation. She was born into ambition. Growing up in Washington, D.C., in a family that valued achievement and influence, she developed an early obsession with success. She didn't just want to be rich, she wanted to matter. Friends from her childhood would later describe her as intensely focused, almost singularly driven, someone who talked about becoming a billionaire not as a fantasy, but as a life goal. When she enrolled at Stanford University to study chemical engineering, she was already thinking beyond classes and exams. She wanted to build something transformative. During her time at Stanford, she worked in a lab and began developing ideas around medical testing technology. The U.S. healthcare system was expensive, complicated, and often inaccessible. Blood testing required vials drawn from veins, processed in centralized labs with results taking time. Holmes saw an opportunity, or at least she believed she did. What if a small device could run hundreds of tests using only a few drops of blood from a finger prick? It would be faster, cheaper, more convenient. It would disrupt an entire industry. In 2003, at just 19 years old, she dropped out of Stanford to start her company, Theranos. In Silicon Valley, this wasn't seen as reckless, it was seen as visionary. The mythology of the tech world celebrates the college dropout founder, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. Holmes understood the power of that narrative and positioned herself within it. From the beginning, she crafted her image with precision. The black turtlenecks, the deep, deliberate voice, the calm, unwavering confidence during interviews. She spoke in big, bold statements about changing the world and empowering patients. Investors listened, and more importantly, they believed. Theranos began raising money. Not small amounts, massive rounds of funding from wealthy families, venture capitalists, and influential figures. One of Holmes's most strategic moves was assembling a board of directors filled with high-profile political and military leaders. These were not scientists or lab experts. They were powerful, respected men with reputations that lent credibility. Their presence signaled trustworthiness. If these people believed in her, why shouldn't others? As funding increased, so did the valuation. At its peak, Theranos was valued at approximately $9 billion. Holmes herself was declared the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world. She graced the covers of major business magazines. She was invited to speak at conferences alongside global leaders. She was celebrated as proof that women could dominate Silicon Valley just as effectively as men. But behind closed doors, cracks were forming. The core of Theranos's promise was its proprietary device, often referred to as the Edison machine. This small device was supposed to run hundreds of accurate blood tests from a tiny sample. There was only one problem. It didn't work reliably. Tests produced inconsistent results. Calibration failed. Data was unstable. Scientists inside the company struggled to make the technology perform as advertised. Instead of slowing down and admitting technical limitations, the company pushed forward. When demonstrations were conducted for investors, they were carefully controlled. Machines were pre-calibrated. Conditions were optimized. And in many cases, when real patient samples were processed, Theranos relied on traditional third-party lab equipment rather than its own device. The illusion had to be maintained at all costs. Inside Theranos, the corporate culture became increasingly secretive. Employees were divided into isolated teams, limiting communication across departments. This prevented engineers and scientists from comparing notes and realizing the full scope of the technological shortcomings. Those who raised concerns were often dismissed or pressured into silence. Strict non-disclosure agreements were enforced. Legal threats loomed over anyone considering speaking out. Fear and loyalty became intertwined. Meanwhile, the company expanded its reach. Partnerships with major pharmacy chains allowed Theranos to open blood testing centers inside retail stores across America. Real patients walked in, pricked their fingers, and trusted the results they received. Some were told they had serious health conditions. Others were reassured that everything was normal. In reality, the accuracy of many of those tests was deeply questionable. The stakes were no longer just financial. They were personal. So how did it go on for so long? Part of the answer lies in Silicon Valley's culture. There is a phrase often used in tech: fake it till you make it. It suggests that exaggeration and optimism are part of the entrepreneurial journey. Founders often promise more than they can deliver in the early stages, believing they will eventually catch up to their vision. But there is a line between optimism and deception, and according to federal prosecutors, Elizabeth Holmes crossed that line. The unraveling began when whistleblowers stepped forward. Former employees, troubled by what they had witnessed, began sharing information with investigative journalist John Carreyrou from the Wall Street Journal. Carreyrou started examining internal documents, interviewing former staff, and comparing public claims to internal data. What he uncovered painted a dramatically different picture from the one Holmes presented to the world. In 2015, the Wall Street Journal published its first explosive report questioning the effectiveness of Theranos' technology. The company responded aggressively, denying allegations and threatening legal action. Holmes went on television to defend her company, maintaining her composure and insisting that the technology worked. But regulators began paying attention. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services launched inspections. The Food and Drug Administration increased scrutiny. As investigations deepened, partnerships began to collapse. Investors grew nervous. The valuation plummeted. Within a few years, the company that had once been worth $9 billion was effectively worthless. In 2018, Theranos dissolved. Federal charges soon followed. Holmes and her former business partner were indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud and conspiracy to commit fraud. Prosecutors alleged that Holmes knowingly misled investors by exaggerating the capabilities of her technology, falsifying pharmaceutical partnerships, and presenting misleading financial projections. The trial became a national spectacle. For months, courtrooms filled with reporters, analysts, and former employees. Evidence was presented showing internal messages acknowledging technological failures. Demonstrations that had misled investors were dissected. Financial documents were scrutinized. Holmes's defense argued that she believed in her vision and was simply overwhelmed by the complexities of scaling a biotech company. They suggested that she relied heavily on her business partner and was not intentionally deceptive. But prosecutors argued that the pattern of misrepresentation was too consistent to be accidental. In 2022, Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty on several counts of defrauding investors. She was later sentenced to more than 11 years in federal prison. The woman once celebrated as a visionary entrepreneur was now a convicted felon. The fallout from the Theranos scandal rippled beyond one company. It forced Silicon Valley to confront uncomfortable questions about due diligence, governance, and the cult of personality surrounding founders. How did so many experienced investors fail to demand rigorous proof? Why did board members with no medical expertise oversee a biotech company? How did media outlets amplify claims without deeper verification? The story of Elizabeth Holmes is not just about one individual's ambition. It is about a system that sometimes rewards storytelling more than substance. It is about the power of image, narrative, and confidence. It is about how easily billions of dollars can move when belief outweighs evidence. And it is a cautionary tale for anyone who assumes that charisma equals credibility. In the end, the illusion collapsed because facts have a way of surfacing. Data cannot be hidden forever. Whistleblowers find their voices. Journalists dig deeper. Regulators intervene. But the damage, once done, cannot always be undone. Investors lost massive sums of money. Patients received unreliable health information. Careers were shattered. And a company once hailed as revolutionary became a case study in corporate fraud. The woman who once stood on global stages promising to change the world now serves as a reminder of how fragile trust can be. If this story opened your eyes and you want more deep, detailed breakdowns of America's biggest scandals, corporate frauds, and hidden power plays, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this story, because the next case might be even more shocking than this one.